Good evening, viewer. Welcome to our number two episode. Um, I'm Dave. We've got Rob and Phil. We're still guys, and it's still night. So we're glad to have you with us. And we hope we don't disappoint tonight. And as always, we promise you'll get what you pay for. So that being said, how are you doing, Rob?
Better than you, apparently.
Yeah, I've been fighting the man flu and or man COVID and or man cold uh, and snowpocalypse.
Did you say you have
How are you doing?
snowpox?
Say that again.
You have snowpox? Is that like
Maybe.
Alaskan monkeypox?
Uh, I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot
With an
usick.
icicle.
With someone else's carrot.
No, I'm not gonna touch that with a 10-foot usick. And if you know what an usick is, you're welcome for that joke. Um, Phil, how are you doing?
Better than you as well. We had like 2 inches of snow last week. It's gone now. It's 75 degrees, 80 degrees today here today. So
Yeah, it was probably a real rough time sweeping the driveway, wasn't it?
it was. It was. I kind of sweated a bit today. It was kind of uncouth.
Okay.
So
For us, it wasn't the 10 inches of snow. It was the sub-zero temperatures that you usually don't get here and the frozen water lines on our camper. But we're good.
Ooh. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's How long were they frozen?
About 9 hours, because that's how long it took me to build a makeshift skirt around the RV and get a blast heater going under there and get them defrosted.
And that was going to be my next question: is what handyman remedy did you rig up? And well, there you go. So
Yeah. Painter's plastic, duct tape. Needed a heat gun to get the duct tape to work because it was sub-zero.
yeah.
And a 60,000 BTU propane heater.
Yeah, no. Little known fact: duct tape, just like ducks, don't work below freezing. Who knew?
Cold.
Um, yeah, so that's interesting. Well, I've got a little bit of an outline for us. As I told you gentlemen before, I was going to try to have a better outline, but snowpocalypse and the man cold flu COVID hit me. So I'm a little bit behind, but I'll try to share with you where we're going to go just in just enough time to give you preparation for where we're going to go. So item number one, and this is how you can tell this is a real high quality production. I'm looking down at my note card. Item number one was an intro. We did that already, so we're already killing it. And we did talk offline after last episode, which was 2 weeks ago. So not last week's episode, unless our viewer viewed that one last week, and then it was last week's episode for him and or her. But we talked offline about bringing a more biblical lens to it intentionally. And so that's something that I want the viewer and or viewers to know that we're going to do. I don't really have a good plan for that tonight, but we'll try and look at everything through that lens intentionally. And then hopefully by next episode, I'll have something dialed in for us to do that more systematically and intentionally. I want to look over some current events. Obviously, we got to talk about Texas. I've got my come and take it patch on in honor of Texas and what they're doing. And then also, we're going to talk about the Ben Shapiro, Tom MacDonald rap. And that's the best I can do. We've got Phil. Do you have your squares that you're going to talk about?
I'm very square. Yes.
Okay, you are hip.
I'm squared away on that, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, too hip to be a square, but also squared away. And do you have advice
stuck
for
in my head
your
now.
dad? For Phil's dad's advice?
No.
No, that's okay.
I'll think of something while we talk here.
Okay, Rob.
Yes.
I meant to ask you. Do you? Because we'll just imagine that most of the people, most of the person watching, is
Go on, Rob.
I have my square.
oh nice. I didn't know we were all supposed to bring squares.
Yep. Hold on. That's awesome. This is not planned.
No,
It wasn't.
well, it was
I
with
had
Phil.
no idea we were doing squares today.
Oh, you gotta check the group chat more than
That
me.
is funny.
Yeah.
There's a group chat?
Sometimes. So yeah. So if you viewer or most of our viewers or most of our viewer don't know anything about squares, they're actually really cool and useful. You'll learn a little bit there. I had been meaning to ask you, Rob, if you wanted to share some fancy coffee snobbery tips.
Oh.
Let's just imagine that
Yeah.
most of our viewer is like me and is not very fancy with anything culinary, and they can use some coffee tips. And if they can't, if they're already fancy and it's useless for them, I need to learn more. So I'm happy to learn about that. Phil doesn't need coffee, but we can just help him work on his patience. I don't know, while he just suffers through watching us talk about coffee. So I'm going to ask you for a coffee tip later if you can field that question.
I'm
Is
sure I
that
could figure something out.
okay? All right. So I think that's our intentionality, or that's our that's my intention at this point. We'll do some current events. We'll do some tools, Phil's dad's wisdom, and coffee tips. And we're going to try to do it all through a biblical lens. And I'll try to facilitate that as we go along, and then in future episodes, be more intentional about that. But let's start off with current events. Texas. If I wanted to know what was going on and I hadn't been on Twitter, how would you explain the events at the border, Phil?
Well, I would say that Biden's border patrol was under orders not to actually stop people. They're letting folks in, facilitating entry, and then once they snagged the few that they noticed, they would then
Mhm.
let them loose into the country with, orders to come report to court in like 5 years. So Texas finally had enough of it, and they
Mhm.
decided that they were going to bring their own National Guard in there and secure the border.
Those heroes.
Yeah, and so National Guard, you gotta love them. And so the problem was that Border Patrol was in the way. So Texas asked them to leave very, very politely, I'm sure. And so they had to leave, and then Texas put up sea wire and razor wire along the fence and
Whoa.
the border.
Wait. I'm sorry. I gotta back up. You just said sea wire and razor wire as if they are two different things.
I've seen pictures of both, yes.
Explain that. Explain how they're different to me.
So razor wire actually has like razor sharp bladed stuff on it
Uh huh.
that will slice you up if you get encumbered in it. And sea wire, concertina wire is what it's called because it's like a concertina. It spans like a slinky. So
Mm-hmm.
does razor wire. Um, but the sea wire it's not sharp, but it is pointy. It has little pointy barbs on it. And so if you touch it or step on it, it'll snag your clothes or your skin. And if you set it up right where it's not pulled too tight, then if you step in the middle strand, the other two will collapse in on your leg and kind of catch it right there. And you get all tangled up. It's a pain. I put out tons of it back in the day. I've lost many a uniform to being torn up by the stuff. If you don't have the
It's
right
really the
gloves,
kinder, gentler wire.
it is. Yeah, sea wire is a kind of gentler wire. It's true. Yeah, that's
Mm.
the Air Force wire. Marines probably use the razor wire. I don't know.
No, I can't. We've used
Okay.
plenty of sea wire.
So now that we're all
You
more
can't afford
erudite
razor wire.
and understand the difference, they put up the sea wire and the razor wire. Why
Yep.
don't they call razor wire R wire if they call sea wire C wire?
Probably because razor wire sounds way cooler.
Okay.
So that's my only guess.
Okay, so we're back to the wire being put up and
Yep.
taken
So the
down.
wire is put up, and then Biden, his administration said, "Hey, you can't do that." And they went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, "Yeah, I guess you really can't. You have to let the Border Patrol in there. You can't block them." And Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, he said, "No, you can't. We're not going to obey that order." And then to retaliate against that, just today, Biden has canceled or paused all the natural gas development, which hurts Texas economy, of course, and ours as well. So he's trying to punish them and make them behave as he wants them to.
So is it fair to say that he's telling them, if you don't enforce laws, or if you enforce laws that are on the book, if you don't stop enforcing the laws that exist,
right,
we will starve your people out?
Yes, we will.
So the
impose economic sanctions on them.
Yeah, the federal government has imposed economic sanctions against a state
for following and enforcing the laws that the government is supposed to enforce, but doesn't want to.
Yeah. Is that a form of economic warfare?
One could say yes.
It could just cut the word economic out.
It's not economic friendliness. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I would say it's a step in that direction, and not accidentally.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the showdown at the border. Last I checked, 25 states, including my own, have supported Texas in this. Yeah.
Yep. I think all of our states have, right?
Yeah.
I hope Tennessee.
Tennessee did, yeah.
I just got here, so I'm kind of learning the ropes.
Nice. Rob, before this, told me about an interview with a nice young man who represented the immigrant class well. Very articulate, it sounded like, in the messaging that he was communicating over the interview. What was that messaging, Rob, that he said?
So it was I don't know if it was an independent reporter, but essentially this gentleman who was very well dressed and very well spoken said, called the reporter, I believe he said he's an idiot or was not intelligent, and if he was intelligent, he wouldn't be talking to him. Because he would know who he is. But don't worry, you're going to know who I am soon enough. That's a paraphrase of the exchange. And then within, I think, 24, 48 hours, the guy's identity was uncovered. And I don't have notes in front of me, but essentially he is a convicted terrorist. He spent time in jail. And now he has illegally crossed our southern border into the U.S. and communicated the threat to one of our countrymen. So
now, when a former convicted terrorist says, "You will know who I am," it doesn't mean that they're going to know who he is because he's going to be about some national gentrification.
Yeah, he's not starting a podcast. I don't think that's his intention.
He's not going to be the next Joe Rogan.
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay, that's you know what, I'd say that's a fair assessment.
Coming at it from an anti-terrorist training standpoint, I might say that even conveys like intent of something, which goes into our threat risk assessment matrix.
Yeah, and if I'm thinking back to training I have received, when somebody who's a known terrorist also says something like that, and they're here illegally, the one thing you're not supposed to do is let them roam on their own recognizance, right? Like, that's the wrong answer?
Like what CBP wanted to do.
Yeah, like that's the wrongest of the wrong answers, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. It's been a minute. Okay. So, sounds like Texas is doing the right thing. And
but for how long? That's the question. Because we're counting on a Republican to hold the line when the pressure is on, and that hasn't happened in a long time.
Yeah, but if anything can be said about Greg Abbott right now, he's not taking this one sitting down, and that's important.
Too soon.
So far, he's doing a really good job.
Well,
I think best case scenario here is that that the other states don't just say that they support Texas, but that they actually whatever it is that the government's now withholding from Texas. I actually think we have a responsibility as states to essentially make up for that deficit.
I know
that would be the best case scenario. It would put the federal government in its right place, which is we really don't need you. Yeah.
yeah, I will say my state has historically been sending people down there, and I'm curious to see if that continues to occur.
I know Virginia did last
Excuse me.
year send people, National Guards down to help out. I don't know if they still are, if they're still down there. I've not looked up
Mm.
that at all, so
Okay.
curious to
But
see.
I'm assuming it sounds like they've also. I'm saying specifically for the economic sanctions
Yeah.
too. Texas probably doesn't need personnel. Although it's a great gesture, but
Mm.
I think it would be great now if these 25 governors would do the economic sanctions to keep those programs going, protect
Yeah.
the economy in Texas.
And if I'm gonna impose our biblical lens on this a little bit, a lot of people are saying you should let migrants cross because that's loving your neighbor. Jesus was a migrant. Um, the obvious hole in that, I think, is it's not loving your neighbor to let the criminals and the child traffickers and the drug mules across, nor the military age males from foreign countries who hate your country. Like, am I going? Is that a stretch there? Saying that's not actually loving your neighbor, letting those people across.
I'd
But
say it's not only not loving my immediate neighbor of fellow Americans, but it's not
Mhm.
loving towards the migrants either. I mean, look at the rape trees. Look at just the terrible, like I said, the human trafficking that goes
Yeah,
on with this. This
yeah,
is modern day slavery, and we're just letting it happen.
we're we're facilitating the market, and the laws, when actually rightly applied for the purpose of loving your neighbor near and far off, are supposed to disincentivize evil.
Right.
But if we're incentivizing it, that seems to be unloving to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
we could also put that verse in its proper context. It's really clear that what Jesus is saying is that you love those who you are in a position to love, specifically those within proximity to you, using the example of the Good Samaritan, right?
mhm.
So who is my neighbor? The first answer to that is who's literally next to you.
Who's in need that you see and you can help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
um,
So I think we can point out how Rob pointed out it's miscontextualized and then also it's misapplied. Even if you did want to shoehorn a context into it, I think.
mhm.
Um, yeah. Okay. Next, anything else on the Texas side before we go to the breaking new uh, rap song of our generation?
Let's go for it, man.
Can't wait.
Okay. All right. Are we supposed to be Daily Wire friendly here, or do I have to pull any punches on this specific?
I
Uh,
stopped doing Daily Wire back when Shapiro started shilling for masks and vaccines. That's just me, though.
yeah,
Three,
that was
three
also
times I've
me.
reached out to them for advertising, and they haven't even responded with a price structure. So don't
Mm.
So
care.
ADP all the way.
All
Yeah,
right, I
that's
like
it.
it.
The only
Overlord is
news
better than
media
God
output
King.
that matters.
Oh, I would say Overlord
It,
is better than God King
yeah,
across the board. I also, yeah, I also was very disappointed with the masks and the vax, and then the Dave Rubin uh, platforming as well. So, but we won't talk about that now. We'll just talk about this Tom MacDonald, um, Ben Shapiro rap. I think, and I don't know much about Tom MacDonald, but if I wanted to be, I don't know, a rap, I don't know much about him at all, except the way he looks. If I wanted to create a psyop where I got a demoniac into the conservative culture, I would make it look like Tom MacDonald, and then I would tell him to rap about conservative adjacent things. Also,
who is I in this scenario? Just really curious.
just saying that if that was my strategy, he looks like a strategy that I would use for that. Yeah. Also, one thing I hate about rap culture is the constant fronting of how successful, how number one, how much money you have, how you're better than everybody else. Um, that song was all about that. Just I hate that part of rap culture too. It's all about me, I, for most of it. And I know somebody's going to get on here and be like, well, you don't listen to the good rap. And
We only have one viewer.
yeah, I know. Maybe he and or she is a rap enthusiast.
Now
But
we're
yeah,
down to
His
0.
name is
Way
Matt.
to go.
yeah, negative viewers at this point. But yeah, it was all very fronting the whole all about me, prideful rap. And not to mention, I can't stand the way this Tom MacDonald guy looks. I mean, you've got a dude with piercings in his face, and I'm just going to say it: women are objects of beauty, men are beasts of burden, and only women should adorn their faces with jewelry and diamonds and stuff. I think a dude doing it just looks wrong, especially when he's got like a bull ring piercing in the nose. Just going there, but I want to know your guys' thoughts. You can disagree with me. Guys' night allows for that.
Well, so I'll push back a
Take it
little
away.
bit. You know, I'm with you on the whole, you know, he looks ridiculous thing, but I don't know. I think I'm torn because part of me says, well, it's nice to have, you know, someone putting out some good ideas in that genre. And
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some of Tom MacDonald's stuff here and there. You know, I'm not a big rap guy. I mean, this may surprise you, but no, I've heard a few of his songs here and there, and I've liked what I've heard for the most part. Um,
Okay.
is he a true, you know, right wing Christian conservative? No. Is he an anti-communist? Yeah, I think so.
So
And
he's a. Do you think he's a true co-belligerent then?
I would say I don't know how true is true, but I think so probably. I've not seen
Okay.
any reason to think not. Now, he doesn't
So
have the same values we do. He doesn't have the same morals that we do exactly. But
mm,
as far as not liking the commie crap, yeah,
okay.
and having that put out there for folks who only ever hear, you know, the mainstream rap, to put it that way,
Mm,
that may be
okay.
a good thing.
And I'll say my objection, other than the all about me content of the song, is primarily his face. So yeah, if there's if there's something more deep than my objection to his face, then by all means go for it.
Well, maybe you should try listening to the music and not watching the music, because I hear you can just
Video
listen to music too.
killed the radio star.
Yeah, well, you know, we're old school.
That's a valid point.
Do we want our? Alrighty.
You know, I'm sure you could add little Tom MacDonald next to your Brian Sauvé. You know, it may be good to go, man.
I would never dream of it. The
But here's
psalmist, the sweet psalmist of Ogden, is in a category all his own.
I'm waiting for the rap not Psalm Sing, but the Psalm Rap album.
Which psalm should he rap? Psalm 2. It goes hard.
I was thinking Psalm 27. That'd be a good rap.
Okay. Brian Sauvé, you're welcome.
Yep. But that's my take. Rob, what do you think, man?
Yeah. Well, here's my take on the whole Tom MacDonald thing. I think conservatives. I think a lot of us, or a lot of them, because I don't even want to group myself in with anybody anymore, but are so used to operating out of a defeatist mindset that when we see a little glimmer of something, they see, I'll go back to they want to just kind of grasp onto it. Right. So we see somebody who's in a genre of music that's typically, actually, rap is probably more based than a lot of other stuff out there these days. But they see something that resonates with them in part, and then they immediately want to latch onto it and glorify it. And, oh, this guy's a hero and he's doing a great job. And they end up looking past all the things that's actually wrong with it and how it actually hurts the conservative movement. And I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but I guess my disappointment is that now you have, Ben, who is a very well-known voice in the conservative movement, not necessarily somebody that I would say that I would think is the poster boy for it, but now he's diving into this world, and it's why? I really feel that in the last few years, what I've seen out of a lot of the mainstream conservative voices is that they're in the entertainment industry now. I'm not opposed to conservatives being in the entertainment industry. I think we need that. I think if you look at some of the stuff that's coming out of Angel Studios, and that's awesome, but cultural commentators don't need to be in the entertainment industry, and it's just really apparent that these guys were rooted in theater and steeped in theater at the beginning of their career and in their early days, and now that they've gained some measure of success, it's almost like they're trying to push back to that.
I agree with what you're saying, and it reminds me of kind of my initial response a couple years ago too. This is right along a line of an objection I had when, and I will say this about Daily Wire: they were definitely they were my gateway drug into conservatism on a popular level.
I was just
And
thinking the same thing.
yeah, and then I just kept going. So I have a leftist tears Tumblr from um, when I was a subscriber a couple years ago. And are you guys familiar with No Quarter November?
Mm.
Oh,
Is our viewer though?
Is our viewer? Are you familiar with it, Rob?
Yes.
Okay, so I put a No Quarter November over the leftist tears Tumblr a couple weeks ago. Just I had the sticker, so I just stuck it on there. I was like, yeah, it'll go here. And as I did it, I thought, we're evolving. But Daily Wire was definitely my gateway drug into Twitter, in fact, and then Christian Twitter, and then Christendom Twitter. So we can thank Daily Wire, and I do appreciate a lot of what Matt Walsh is doing.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate some of the things Michael Knowles says, especially his phrase he's used frequently that everything is theological
Yeah.
at its root level. Totally agree with him on that. Even though our finer points on certain theological issues would differ, he understands that truth, and I appreciate that every time I have heard him say it. But when I was a brand new subscriber, I think it was like my first Backstage or something I was going to watch, and it was where they did it at this what amphitheater did they do it at? They rented out a big one, and it was all a big theater kids show. They had Smokey Mike, and I was so disappointed. I was wanting some incisive, insightful discussion that I'd gotten from them on several occasions, and it looked like they were wanting to be entertainers, like Rob said, not going into the
and this is my point, and you see the same thing with James O'Keefe, right? With whatever he was trying to do last year with the whole dance routines and all that, you see the same thing with Steven Crowder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that people should just stay out of entertainment. I understand shooting promos for your shows and making it fun and making it funny, but it really seems to me that a lot of people in the conservative media, and if you look back, Mike was an actor, right? And he's probably hasn't. What's that?
Michael Knowles?
Yeah. He was an actor.
I didn't know that. I thought he was an author with his Reasons to Vote for Democrats book.
No, I'm pretty sure he was in a movie at some point before he got into. And it seems to me that a lot of people kind of start off in there. They went to school for drama. They went to school for theater. They got involved in the conservative movement, and then now they're circling back to bring about. I don't mean it as a mean way. Their failed entertainment careers, but kind of just wish they would have stayed where they were because they were doing a good job.
Yeah, no, I can get that. Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know. I'm not. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm not convinced that it's the right thing to do, but I don't know that it's necessarily wrong to be entertaining or to do silly things like the rap thing. I mean, because let's be honest. I mean, no one's going to watch that and be like, "Whoa, Ben Shapiro's awesome. I didn't like him before, now I do." And those who do like him, they're going to laugh and say that's funny.
I think the problem's more who is he doing it with.
Yeah, and like
well, I mean, to be fair,
neither Ben nor Tom MacDonald have Christian values. Like they're not.
Well, to be fair, Ben's not even a conservative.
True.
There's that.
I'll say he's a fiscal conservative, but a fiscal conservative does not a full conservative make.
Yeah.
And I love hanging out with friends and saying that for the first time to a group of friends, and they look at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Well, let me tell you about classical liberalism."
He's more than a fiscal conservative, though. I mean, he's conservative on probably the most important topic in the culture, right?
Well,
the right to
here's
life.
yeah, but here's my problem is that, well, conservatives, that's not going to help this culture. That's not going to advance the cause of Christ in this world. Trying to
Well, what is
conserve the
conservatism?
1980s.
Yeah.
That's what it is nowadays for the most part. That's what mainstream conservative is. Let's go back to the Reagan years. Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's garbage.
Yeah, I just found out recently that no fault divorce that was on Reagan, apparently. Like he's the one that ushered in that. So
yeah. Look into his gun stuff.
Not conservative.
yeah. Look into his gun stuff. You said, Phil. Yeah. Okay. Are we allowed to say the G word if we're on YouTube?
Gun?
We can't show them being modified, I think, is the rule.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if I put like a prefix or a suffix on gun, is that a modification? Gunnery.
Dang, now we're demonetized. Way to go.
Dang it. So sorry. I'll need to apologize.
That's one strike on our channel right there.
Yeah, I'll need to apologize to our overlord for that. Yeah, I think those are all pretty good observations, views on the Tom MacDonald, Ben Shapiro. I'll close it with this. It's the rap video nobody asked for. I think I will say that.
You nailed it.
But given our depravity, we probably deserved it. So.
Oh man,
this is our penance.
What's that Batman line?
Not the hero we deserve, or the hero we got.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not the rap song we wanted, but it's the rap song we deserved. I don't know. I probably butchered that in a few different ways. But Phil, what wisdom does your dad have for us this week?
So my dad's wisdom piece that I actually had thought of before, but I read my notes. Dad's wisdom when I became a father. He said, it's important to keep in mind that as a father, you are there to be a safety net for your son, but not a harness.
Mm.
And if you've ever done like a ropes course or something like that, and you have the harness on, the little strap went up to the cable above you, the hardest challenge is to not hang on to the rope that's attached to your harness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy to try to walk out there and then be like, oh, I'm getting twist tippy, and I grab that there. And if you fall, okay, your harness is right there and it catches you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just had a safety net underneath there, it'd be a lot more dangerous. Be a lot more scary, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And falling down would have more consequences. And so with our sons and daughters, I'm sure too, especially with the sons, it's as a dad, he said, you really want to watch him and let him hurt himself just enough to learn a lesson, but not enough to maim or kill himself. And so I think that's kind of some good advice that I've been following as a father.
Mm-hmm.
That let the kid, he did something stupid, and I might warn him, I might not. And the burned hand is the best teacher. So that's my dad advice there from my dad.
I don't know if the Air Force or Marines say it, but in the Army, you heard all the time when a soldier would attempt something and it would go poorly, in such a way that it would leave an impact. They would say, learning has occurred. Like, so yeah.
Training has occurred, yeah.
Yeah, learning has occurred. The learn from the burned hand. All right. I like it. Yeah, being a safety net, not a harness. Rob, do you have any coffee wisdom for those of us that are culinarily stuck in our college bachelor days?
All right. So simple entry level gateway coffee wisdom. If you actually just want to start experiencing coffee in the more of the coffee culture, specialty grade level, start with a French press.
Okay.
They're super affordable. and they're super easy, and you get to learn the process. I think you can get a French press for like $10 these days.
Mhm.
And with that, find some locally roasted coffee, or go to my website and make sure it's roasted fresh, and start playing around.
Okay. Yeah. So when you say roasted fresh, I do know a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A buddy of mine owned a coffee shop when I lived in Florida, and he was telling me about the importance of roasted fresh and everything. And he was telling me, like, if you go by Starbucks, for instance, it's been in the supply chain for so long, you could have 6 to 12 month old roasted coffee. Um, and I don't know, and I hope Starbucks doesn't sue me if I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not claiming
Oh,
that's fact. That's what he told me.
no, no. First of all, no company operating on that level,
Mhm.
as far as size and scope of the company, is going to keep 6 to 12 months of supply within their supply chain, because that actually
Okay.
ties up a tremendous amount of capital. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I don't know how fresh your we would file Starbucks under conventional coffee.
Ooh.
Conventional would be your Folgers, your Maxwell House, your Starbucks, pretty much anything you can get in the grocer.
Hmm.
Um, and conventional coffee is not known for being super fresh.
Okay.
Maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's not. The freshest coffee, the best time to consume coffee from the time it was roasted is in about 72 hours.
Okay.
So 3 days after roasting is when you're going to have the best experience. And the sweet spot is probably 3 to 10 days. And then from there, it'll start to dwindle. And I'd say after about 30 days, you're stepping into the conventional coffee realm. You're not going to get as much of the characteristics that you will. It's still good. I mean, I'll still pull a shot of espresso off of a bag that I've had for a month, but
Hmm.
it's just not. It's not as good.
Okay. And so if I'm doing a French press and I go and I get a French press,
Mhm.
uh, my understanding, as basic as it is water that's at 211 degrees or just been boiled is not ideal. Is it,
Correct.
it can,
Yeah. So
it can,
what happens is, if the water's um, so 205 degrees is my cap, and I
okay.
usually do between 195 and 205 degrees. I'll actually set my kettle for 209, because in my mind, as you're pouring, you're losing some of that temperature to the air.
Okay.
Um, I haven't tested that with a thermometer in the pot yet, but maybe I should. But anyway, the reason you don't want boiling water is boiling water actually starts to cook the bean, as opposed to
Hmm.
just extracting its goodness. So when you brew coffee with boiling water, you start getting some bitters, some notes that you really don't need to have nor want. It doesn't aid in caffeine extraction. There's no benefit to brewing it super hot water. So
Yeah. And what do you
195 to 205
lose?
is a sweet spot.
What do you lose the more you cook a bean?
It's not so much what you lose; it's what you gain. You gain bitter flavor.
Do you lose caffeine though? The more you cook a bean?
I have not read that.
Okay.
Now,
I was told that.
when you're talking about roast levels,
Hmm.
a dark roast is going to have lost more caffeine than a light and a medium roast. So
Okay.
if you're looking for high caffeine,
Mm.
there's certain varieties that are going to carry more caffeine. I'm going to start rapping.
I don't
Arabica
know.
is one. Robusta is another. They're known
Mm.
to have a higher caffeine content. Look for those varieties and look for lighter roasts. You're not going to have
Mhm.
that bold flavor of a dark roast, but you will get more caffeine in your cup that way.
Okay, so I've got my water 105 to 95 or 195 to
To
205.
205. Yep.
Yeah. What kind of grind am I looking for in a French press then?
Coarse.
Coarse. Okay.
Coarse grind.
And okay, how coarse?
Yep. Um,
Like, how do
well,
I
if
measure
you
that?
go,
How do I know it?
yeah. So if you're going to if you're buying it ground, a drip grind is going to be a little bit finer
Mm,
than what I typically prefer in a French press, but it will work.
okay.
The best thing to do is, if you're ordering from northarrow.coffee,
Mm,
you could select coarse grind right on our website, and it is the right grind for a French press. or if you're purchasing from a local roastery, which I also think people need to support their local businesses as much as I want you to buy my stuff. Tell them, hey, I want it ground for a French press. If they don't know what to do, don't buy coffee from them. They don't know what they're selling you.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're doing
beyond that. There's, you can get, I have a grinder back there that, I can dial in for anywhere from espresso to French press, but I feel like that's not pertinent to this conversation. That's a $900 piece of equipment. It's, we're just talking about the gateway right now, right? Not the, not the addiction.
And doing it right. So 195 to 205 coarse grind.
Yep.
What's the steep or brew time? How do you is it
All
brew
right, yeah.
or is it steep?
Brew. I prefer brew.
What's the brew
so
time?
you're gonna do you're gonna weigh out a 1:17 coffee to water ratio for your French press. So for every gram of coffee, you're gonna want we're going metric. You're gonna want a gram of water. I don't know how to put this into 12s, by the way.
You just gave me a 1 for 1.
Yeah. So every gram of coffee, you're going to want about 17 grams of water.
Okay.
Most kitchen scales have a gram or an ounce function on them, so you can, toggle between that. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put your coffee in the bottom of the dry French press. One thing you can do is actually preheat that if you really want to get fancy with it. Put some hot water in that French press. Let the glass get hot. Pour it out. It's going to help your brew maintain temperature longer. So you put your grinds in your French press, and you're going to put just enough water in there, essentially to wet all the grinds. And then from there, you've got 30 to 60 seconds of what we call bloom. The reason we call it bloom is if you have super fresh coffee that's been roasted within 7 to 10 days, you're going to see that coffee start to expand like a flower. It doesn't really look like a flower. It looks gross, but after 30 to 60 seconds, you want to go ahead and finish pouring in your water. Excuse me. I like to give it a little swirl when I'm doing that to kind of get everything fully incorporated. From that point, I'm going to wait 3 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and push the filter down on the French press and pour my cup. I don't like to let coffee sit in the French press. The downside of the French press is it is an immersion brewer, meaning that you're immersing the coffee in water. But even though you've pushed those grinds down, that water is still interacting with that coffee in the bottom. So it's best to do brew fresh, serve fresh. If you got extra, throw it in the mason jar, toss it in the fridge for some iced coffee later on.
All right. So we've got the temperature you need the water, the amount of grounds you need, and the brew time. Anything you want to throw into that that's enough to get you started?
That's enough to get. That was what got me going on this trajectory that ultimately ends up there.
All right. So it's a gateway drug in as far as the process of coffee goes.
Yeah, and like so many other drugs, you realize it's much more lucrative to be a dealer, and it supports your habits. So,
all righty. Well, that's good on the coffee side. Phil is going to teach us about some squares. Now, not all squares are the same.
That's true.
Got a couple different types with you, right, Phil?
We do, and I think that Rob has some too for other visuals if he wants to show.
I'm the only one that doesn't have his squares with him.
Yeah. So we'll be taking your man card after the show, just so you know.
Yeah, but, I'm sorry.
So yeah, this kind of square is called a speed square and a conventional square. Now, what's interesting, if you're totally new to this, is that they're not actually square, right? I got a little L-shaped thing here, and I have a triangle-shaped thing here. But they're called a square because it helps you get a right angle, right angles meaning a square, when you are making cuts and drawing lines on wood and other things like that. The speed square is actually very cool.
Also called a carpenter's square, correct?
You can call it a carpenter's square, yes, because it is set up all these different
unless you're a carpenter.
And lots, all this stuff. If you're a carpenter, you don't call it a carpenter square. It's just called a speed square. But these numbers are set up for making different cuts at different angles. If you're cutting for roof beams, you want to have a 10-foot board be a certain angle and have a certain amount of drop from over a space. Then this is set up to do that. I won't go into all that right now, but what's nice about this is you have this nice little lip right along here. And basically, if you had a board, which I don't have a board in here, really, we'll use this stuff. It's my board. You can set this right on there, and what's nice is that if your board has a straight edge to it, and you put it on there, you hold it on tight, and now you have a line that's perpendicular, a good right angle line across your board.
A square line, if you will.
A square line, if you will, yes. So you draw your line there, and you have a nice square. One thing that's cool on this little guy is you have these notches right here, you see. And so the first notch is at 1 inch. Every notch is a 1/4 inch after that. So let's say I wanted to draw a line at 1.5 inches. I could put my pencil right in here, and I could slide this along my edge. It would give me a nice line right there. I don't have to, get a tape measure or a chalk line and mark it out and get it down that way. I can just slide it and draw a straight line.
Some would say that's speedy.
It is speedier than going the other routes, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So you have that. Obviously, it also has this 45 degrees. If you need a 45, you slap it on something. Boom, I got a 45. Now, what's neat on this one is you have this little divot right back here. And that is your pivot point. And if you wanted to get a different degree line, well, you would look at your degrees out here on this edge. And if I wanted to have a 30 degree line, you take it and you bring it down. So it's 30 is on along the edge of your line there. And now you have a 30 degree line here.
Okay.
So you can get quick, speedy angles that you want on a board. Very useful when you're doing framing and whatnot. If I'm doing fine woodworking, I don't use this for my angles. I'm using more protractors and that kind of stuff, really getting it right. Or if you have a good miter saw or chop saw, you dial it in that way. But yeah, this is good for rough and tumble. If you're out there just making quick cuts, knock something 2x4s, this is what you want. So, and this guy, it's a regular square again. You got your right angle here, good straight lines, pretty solid. A little flex to it, but it's pretty solid and doesn't get too bent on you too easily. And you have rulers on here, also a ruler on this guy. So if you wanted to put measurements, this is about 7 and an eighth inch, which is basically two 2x4s put together, 3.5 inches for a 2x4. So you can lay it across two 2x4s and get the same line across two, which is nice.
So you said that's two 2x4s at 7 and how long?
Well, 7 inches, but then you have a slight bit of gap to it maybe, and so it overhangs a little bit too. So that's 7 inches. You can put it across there and draw your line the whole way across and not stop short.
What I wanted to do real quick for maybe our viewer, if it's a young man who's never swung a hammer, is point out that the 4s and 2x4s are not actually 4 full inches.
Yes.
I've heard legend say that they were once in bygone years. I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is true.
Let me jump in on the lumber.
Yeah. Oh,
you actually still can when you purchase rough sawn lumber, right, which means that the lumber hasn't been surfaced yet. You
smoothed out.
would actually purchase a 2x4 in 2x4 inches.
Okay.
So lumber is cut. So if you're making a 2x4 for framing, lumber is rough sawn on a bandsaw or a head saw to 2 inches by 4 inches. But then it is run through a planer where it's surfaced and made smooth, and the edges are why can't I think of the word right now?
Rounded.
Crayons, where the edges are rounded, and you end up with a 1.5 by 3.5 inch dimensioned piece of lumber, but it actually started off as a 2x4.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason I wanted to point that out is I have heard stories where young men have gone to their first job on the work site and they've been told to grab a 2x4, and they've taken their tape measure and they've returned empty-handed, saying there's no 2x4s because they've been looking for something that was actually 2 inches by 4 inches, and you don't find that generally.
So what's more important for not the guy working construction site, but just doing work around the house, building something, is you got to bear in mind that when you get a 2x4, it's not 2x4, it's 3.5 by 1.5, because you lose a 1/4 inch on each side of it, right? So 1/4 inch top and bottom, that's 1/2 inch gone, 1/4 inch to the sides. But the length, if it's an 8 foot, is 8 feet. Okay, so if you're planning out how much wood you need, you got to measure that out, figure out, what I need. Bear in mind that if you're going to cut this thing, Your saw blade is probably 1/8 of an inch thick. Okay, so you're going to lose that every cut you make. But when you're planning, if you end up drawing your own designs out for something, for say you're building a table or a stool or something, shelf, that's easy to do. So you drawing that out, as you draw your dimensions, bear in mind that 2x4s, and same thing if it's 2x6, same thing. It's 1.5 inches by 5.5 inches. All right, so take off a 1/2 inch for whatever the thickness and the width are, but your length is actually truly what the length is.
Yeah, and I want to point out an existential truth amidst this conversation, and kind of the reason I was asking specific questions of Rob and the coffee, and I appreciate Phil's specific discussion on the length and width of wood is, so when you're flying and you got a dual cockpit aircraft, one of our communication principles is basically be explicit. Like, don't say, hey, flip that switch over there. You got to be explicit or specific about what you're communicating, because I don't know if you know this or not, but sloppy communication in cockpits can kill people. So my existential application of that concept is specificity is a virtue. And so what I hope our young listener learns in this, whether it's coffee or working on the construction site or projects at home or flying an aircraft, get your mind thinking in specifics. Be explicit about what you're doing, specific with what you're doing, because that gets better results than just generally showing up and kind of just giving your best shot at it without focusing on what you're doing. And I want to tie this into Proverbs 22:29. This is part of being excellent at what you do. Proverbs 22:29 says, "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men." Scripture venerates men who excel at their work, and this very much applies to not in an anal retentive way, but in a attentive way of sweating the details, in a sense, like being specific, explicit, measuring out your work, whether it's coffee or it's construction. So that's, yeah. So you guys both gave very good examples on being attentive and specific with your work, whether it's construction or coffee. So yeah, I hope our listener takes this with him. I assume it's going to be guys listening to the show, or guy listening to the show. But yeah, very, very good lessons from both you guys. And I hope they can take the general concept too of being specific along with them on that.
Well, can I jump on that real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that, like I said, on specifics there, if you're doing fine craftsmanship, like be coffee or building something, one thing that I found doing fine woodworking, like cabinetry and that kind of stuff, building real tight, nice looking stuff, is you have to get all of the basic details just as precise and perfect as possible if you want the whole thing to turn out well. Right? Rob talks about, hey, you need to make sure that you're between 195 and 205, and maybe even 209 for what you lose in the air. Like, that's detailed to get that good overall product. Okay. And when I was first starting woodworking, I used rough and tumble stuff. That's all I had. And I could never make very good looking stuff until I bought a jointer and a planer, which makes things like boards perfectly straight and exactly the right dimension you want. And then I can make things fit nicely and make beautiful things. And the same thing goes for our lives, right? And it's for our Christian walks. And if you're fudging the small details, your end product's going to suck. If you're cutting corners and you're sending a bit here and a bit there, and you're not too worried about it, just little stuff, just little details. I'm not really as devoted as I should be, or I'm not taking the time to read my Bible at all, really, half the time. But I got the big stuff down. I go to church and I do all that, and I get family worship in, every once in a while. Man, if you don't get the fine details, your Christian walk is not going to be overall squared away. So,
and that reminds me. So the proverb says, "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings."
Come on, dude.
I think
That's
I think of us at the end of our Christian walk,
Yep.
regardless of whether or not we excelled in our work, we're going to stand before the king,
Mhm.
and he's going to ask, "Well, with the talents I gave you, like, were you trying to fine tune them? Like, no one's going to do perfect, but were you working to fine tune the talents and opportunities I gave you, whether it's in work or in family, and community, and that kind of stuff?" So yeah, there, regardless of how we excel or not, we're going to stand before a king and have to answer for that.
Yeah.
You said something a second ago, Rob. What were you? I didn't quite get.
Well, I don't know, but I got something to say now. I think I could kind of just summarize what we're talking about here as when I look at the culture, especially the church culture in America. I think a lot of people seem to talk about being saved. When did you get saved? Saved, and that's great. But I think the time has come that we need to, being saved is enough for salvation. But if you actually read the Bible and if you actually study the first century church, there is a tremendous amount of Christian life that follows that.
Yep.
This walk is more about getting out of going to hell by the skin of my teeth. Not going to lay out all the details of that here because, quite frankly, I think that knowledge without revelation can be pretty useless. So go to your scriptures and study that. Study the early church. Read the book of Acts and see what's going on there. And start to catch a vision for what it actually means to be a disciple of Christ, not just one who's simply saved by Christ.
And I 100% agree. And it's surprising when I've asked people this question and got surprising answers. When you ask them what's the Great Commission, they say, "Well, spread the gospel." I'm like, no, disciple the nations, and that starts by sharing the gospel. And Paul, Paul, justifying his ministry at one point, says, "Did I not share with you the whole counsel of Scripture?" Like there is more than gospel. Not to diminish gospel, but gospel awakens you and saves you to that life to then walk further and deeper every day for the rest of your life in. So yeah, I 100% agree, Rob. And on that note, I think we're trying to keep this at about an hour, right?
I think we're right there, man. I think this is a good note to wrap on.
I'm
Not
looking at
that wrap we saw earlier, but
Yes. If we end now, it'll be a better rap than Ben and old Tom MacDonald.
Remember, conservative rap or C rap, like C wire, just spells crap.
Yes. And on that note, you guys got what you paid for. We're still guys. It's still night.
Still night.
And we'll see you at an unspecified time in the future. Bye.